Well, we continue with the story of Abraham and Sarah as we start a new chapter, Genesis 21 1 to 7. So let's read this. Now, you may have it at home, but I'm going to read it anyway eh, because I'm going to read it from the authorized version. And the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bore to him, Isaac, which means laughter. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac at 8 days old, as God had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. And Sarah said, God hath made me laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would have given children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age. Let's unpack this. Although Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah 90, God miraculously fulfilled his promise made 25 years earlier to grant him a son. That was back in Genesis 12, verse 7. 3 times we read in 2 verses that God kept his word. As he had said, says, as he had spoken. That's in verse 1. And at the set time of which God had spoken to him. God always kept his word. May I add to that? God always keeps his word. These promises were made back in Genesis 18:10 and 14, and it reads thus. And he said, I will certainly return to thee according to the time of life, and lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the time appointed I will return unto thee according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. Now, before we go on, I would like to add a little side note here. When God visited Abraham, he had already had time to heal from circumcision. And from the time he got circumcised to the time the son would be born was only about a year. So if it's only about a year, then he already was healed when God spoke to him. And then after that, he went down to see Abimelech. And Abimelech was about to molest Sarah, and where God stopped him. As a matter of fact, God said to him in Genesis 20, verse 6, I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffered I thee not to touch her. Folks, I contend that Sarah was already pregnant and Abraham didn't have the faith to believe that she was pregnant. So you see, at the appointed time, it takes 9 months for a child to develop, so she must have already been pregnant. And it says here, for Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son It doesn't give a timeline. It just said that she did at 90 years of age. So let's continue. This was my side note. I can see the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. God rebuilt Sarah from the inside out to be fertile where there was only barrenness and infertility, when he declared, Sarah, thy wife, shall have a son. I can also see Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the set time of which God had spoken to him. Yes, God said that Sarah would have a son when God would return according to a certain time of life. Now, I can certainly see the fulfillment with these two statements, but the first one, the Lord visited Sarah as he had said. I don't see the Lord visiting anyone until verse 12. And that was to Abraham. But it plainly says the Lord visited Sarah. So did God return or not? Note, Sarah had and would never have been able to bear children ever. When it was time to deliver the baby, God most probably did make an appearance to make the delivery bearable. Folks, he visited her to recreate her ovaries, her entire reproductive system. So, God most probably did make an appearance to make the delivery bearable and to bring life to everything that made her a woman, so she could feed the newborn baby. As we see in verse 7, she says, Sarah gave children suck. Wow, what a fitting name Isaac would be. Isaac means laughter. Abraham laughed for joy. Sarah laughed with unbelief and incredulity. But Ishmael would later laugh at him in mockery and derision. Now Sarah rejoiced as she celebrated Isaac's birth. God hath made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. Now we come to what Sarah said in verse 7. Who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah would have given children suck? To Sarah, her having a child after being declared barren. Genesis 11:30. Sarai was barren. She had no child. To Sarah, her having a child after being declared barren was met with overwhelming joy. She also said, I have borne him a son in his old age. Abraham was repeatedly told he would have a child from Sarah. He was now 100 years old, and it finally happened. You see, God didn't just rejuvenate Sarah. He also rejuvenated Abraham, as we shall see in a future chapter. You see, one thing we learn, and we need to learn, even today, when God said it, it will be so. And folks, Abraham realized it. God said it, and it became